Welcome back. In this four-part series, we are inspecting the very important event, that being the backlog refinement. Now, so far we have done three parts. In part one, we did a quick flyby. That was just an overview of the backlog refinement. In part two, we did a deep dive, going into much more details about every aspect of backlog refinement. In part 3, we looked at the supporting cast being the artifacts that can help the team in backlog refinement. In this part 4, we want to look at the patterns. We want to look at the patterns that can help the team in backlog refinement. Before we go into those details though, first let's define the term patterns itself. Patterns are in essence templates for solving specific problems. In other words, patterns are considered the behaviors, habits of the team and individuals within the team. Another way to look at it, patterns can also be considered the best practices. So here I want to focus on the positives, the positive behaviors that we want our team to adopt. These positive behaviors will help the team in backlog refinement. That will help them make the backlog refinement much more productive and effective for them. As discussed earlier, the backlog refinement has a chain reaction. The backlog refinement impacts everything that the team does in the future sprints. It affects the output, it affects the throughput, and everything in between. And eventually, I would say the backlog refinement has an impact on the morale of the team. So, let's look at some of these patterns, some of these behaviors to help our teams. First, I would say the entire team is involved in the refinement. We want, ideally, the entire team in the room doing this backlog refinement. As we talked earlier, what we are looking for is that conversation among the team members. We are looking for conversation between the team and the product owner as well. So having the entire team is important. It also brings everybody's experience to the table. Everyone has different background, different experience, and what we are looking for is the wisdom of crowd here. So the first one is the entire team is in the room doing the backlog refinement. The second behavior or second pattern that I look for is that we have a team in the room. As we talked about earlier, the entire team is in the room, but more importantly, this team is engaged in the conversation. We have a cross-functional team, we have an empowered team in the room and engaged actively in the conversation. They are in the room physically as well as mentally. We want them mentally present in the room and participate in that ongoing conversation. Participate actively and ask appropriate questions to the product owner, to other team members, and eventually that helps them get the story to that ready state. The third pattern I'm looking for is that there is a high level of psychological safety in the room. Now, Scrum Masters, you can help the team here. Create an environment where the team members feel safe in sharing their ideas and opinions. Often, differing ideas and opinions. In fact, I would be looking for those differing ideas and opinions because that's where all this experience comes to the table and we can make the best decision based on the information that we have from all the team members. The next pattern I want to talk about is that we have a PO in the room who is present and participates in the conversation, in the discussion. We need a keen product owner with a deep product backlog. Now, keen is referring to knowledgeable, engaged, empowered, and negotiator. The deep is talking about detailed appropriately, emerging, estimated appropriately, and prioritized. Right? So we need a keen product owner with a deep product backlog. The next pattern I'm looking for is that there is a conversation happening between these two parties. These two parties being the product owner and the team. So we have a product owner and the development team jointly working on the user stories. They start with the why, the product owner explains the why, and through the conversation, the team identifies the what and the how. Through the conversation, team collects all the information as to what we need to build and deliver. And then the team discusses as to how we can build and deliver that. Of course, like everything else in Agile, even backlog refinement should be a time-boxed activity. You don't have unlimited time, so you want to time box even the backlog refinement. Another very important pattern I would be looking for is that the PO comes to the backlog refinement prepared. She has done her homework before she comes to the backlog refinement session. She is bringing the stories which she has prioritized, of course, right? And we are looking to the product owner to provide us more details from the business point of view, at least from the functionality point of view. So what we are looking for is a product owner who has done some homework and comes prepared to the session so that she can answer, if not all, most of the questions that the team asks her during the backlog refinement session. Another pattern is that if you look around in the room, whether it's a physical room or a virtual room where the team is doing this backlog refinement, you should see the definition of ready and definition of done. I consider definition of ready and definition of done as the two bookends of a user story. They tell you the start and the end state. Now I'm big on this one, the next one, and that being the dependencies. During the backlog refinement, the team identifies the dependencies. We want the team to at least identify the dependencies. They may not be able to resolve those dependencies right there and there, but at least even the identifying of those dependencies will help the team in a long way. Next, I would say is the estimation and slicing of the user story is done in the backlog refinement. I consider that slicing and estimation as part of the backlog refinement. PO and the dev team is collectively managing the product backlog. Yes, PO owns the product backlog and PO is accountable for the product backlog. And she's often the one who starts the user stories. With that said, even the development team can contribute to the product backlog. Contribute by adding some of those technical enabling stories, some of those spike stories, those research stories. The next pattern is that through the backlog refinement, the team working with the product owner brings the story from a raw state to the ready state. So I don't care if the product owner writes some crappy stories and brings those crappy stories to the backlog refinement. The input, I'm fine with it being a crappy user story. What we want though is when we walk out of this backlog refinement, we have a refined user story. We have a story that is ready. We took a raw story, maybe a crappy story, through the conversations, we brought it to that ready state. The team, again in collaboration with the product owner, uses the invest and the spider to bring the story from a raw state to the ready state. Another pattern I'm often looking for is, again, if you look at that room, whether it's a physical room or a virtual room, we should see some of those baseline stories. We should see some of those anchor stories to which the team can go back to and compare the story to those anchor stories to come up with the relative effort estimate. Next one, again, I'm big on that. The pattern is that the team never loses the sight of customer, their needs and their pain points. Team questions every story, how it will help them deliver the happiness to their customers. In this 4-part series, we looked at the backlog refinement from different vantage points. Does your team do the backlog refinement? That's the first very basic question. Does your team do backlog refinement? Is your team doing the backlog refinement with a regular frequency? How does your team do the backlog refinement? How do you coach your team on the backlog refinement? How close are you, your team's backlog refinement, to what we discussed so far in this 4-part series? Share your thoughts, ideas, insights in the comments below.